last part rather firmly and with a slight shiver of recollection. Ash struggled to get up as he grunted. "I've gotta reach Haunter, gotta calm it down." Giselle and Misty looked on as he continued trying to force himself up with his Pokémon mirroring their trainer. "Ash, stop, you need to rest, you're gonna hurt yourself," Misty told him in a loud voice, worrying for her secret crush. Giselle simply shook her head sadly. "He won't listen, Misty, none of them. He's determined to do whatever he can for Haunter, and his Pokémon will do anything he does." Misty pointed towards Haunter, who was currently staying still, observing the new arrivals with narrowed eyes while ready to go off again at any moment. "Look at it. Look at all Ash has already done for it." Fuji said Haunter was consumed by darkness and shadows before, it's not now, so Ash has done what he set out to do. The boy in question grunted again as he got to his feet. "No, I haven't. I may have helped take the darkness away from it, but Haunter is still angry and confused. If I don't see this all the way through, then it'll just slide right back into the same desolation and despair that it was before." Ash panted a little as Pikachu and Charmander struggled to their feet. The boy was just about to give a command to his exhausted Pokémon when he felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning his head, he saw Agatha looking at him with a straight-faced and serious expression upon her aged visage. "Let me handle it from here, Ash. If you need someone to battle Haunter and keep it distracted so you can get to it again, then let me do it." She walked out into the middle of the room then without waiting for a reply and locked her eyes with that of Haunter's own blazing red ones, whom was now looking at her sharply in return. "I am a member of the Elite Four, and as such, I have a duty to this region. To fight and defend all those who live here, be they Pokémon or people, no matter what cost. You children have done more today than I would have ever thought possible, and for that." She looked back at Ash and smiled. "You have my respect." She faced forward again as her Gengar suddenly appeared in front of her and stared challengingly at Haunter. "Now it's time for us to do our part." Fuji and Brock walked over to Ash and the girls as the older man spoke wearily, "Agatha, be careful. You know what happened the last time we fought that thing. Do not underestimate it." The woman in question glanced back at Fuji. "I'll be fine, don't you worry about me. We are far stronger than we were all those years ago." Agatha walked up then until she was in line with her Pokémon, banging her cane down on the floor before saying in a loud, firm voice, "Your battle is with me now, Haunter, face us." The powerful ghost type turned its eyes to Agatha and then stretched itself out to its full, imposing size before wailing, screeching loudly at them. Agatha just remained calm and took a few deep breaths before exhaling a final time. "So it begins." She quickly looked at her Gengar, who seemed just as collected and poised as she was. Shifting her vision again, she could see that everyone else had fallen back a bit to give them room enough to battle, Ash and his Pokémon just a little bit closer so he could make a dash for Haunter when the time was right. Unfortunately for her, Haunter took the momentary lapse in her concentration to raise its hands and fire two massive shadow balls at them. Agatha's reaction time, however, was instantaneous as she hurriedly called out to her Pokémon, "Gengar, be quick." At speeds that left the others in dizzy shock, Gengar quickly phased out of existence and reappeared just a few feet away from the first giant shadow ball, which hit the ground and exploded. The second energy ball Gengar focused on and just stood in place, waiting patiently until the deadly attack was right upon it. Then, raising its hands up, Gengar quickly charged and launched a powerful but much smaller shadow ball at the larger one on Agatha's command. Both attacks met in midair and, despite the size difference, the power was almost even as they collapsed in on one another and exploded, sending pieces of rubble and smoke flying in every direction. Agatha capitalized on the moment then by commanding, "Gengar, press forward and use Curse." Gengar flew forward through the smoke cloud as its eyes glowed red and a similar colored veil of energy rose up around it. Haunter was not even slightly deterred though, as its own eyes shone an even brighter red before a beam of nightshade shot from them and through the air. Gengar managed to see the twin laser-like beams just as it emerged on the other side of the smoke cloud and quickly dodged to the side with instincts and reflexes that were honed from years of training and battling. Its energy stored up, Gengar cried out its name as a powerful burst of red ghostly energy raced across the short distance separating it from Haunter. However, since Haunter's own Nightshade attack was on a collision course with Gengar, both attacks met in midair and commenced in yet another duel for supremacy between two very powerful Pokémon. Ash, His friends and Fuji watched on in amazement as the two beams of energy grew larger and brighter from the extra power both Pokémon were pumping into them. For Agatha, this was a repeat performance of the last time she and Gengar battled Haunter, and due to that, she was quick to take action. Gengar used Rapid Shadow Ball and strike the area around Haunter. While still maintaining the power of Curse, Gengar raised its hands and made small shadowy balls of energy in each one that it quickly unleashed at Haunter. Several more energy balls followed the former two, and every single one of them all went towards Haunter. Instead of hitting it though, the balls of energy struck the ground, walls and ceiling around Haunter, which caused the Pokémon's attention to become temporarily distracted. This was all Gengar needed to force more power through its body, which made Curse stronger as it started to overcome Haunter's Nightshade. The latter Pokémon didn't have enough time to react before Gengar's Curse attack cut completely through Nightshade and impacted with its massive form, lighting Haunter up in red as both it and Gengar started to convulse and cry out in pain. Curse was an attack that afflicted both Pokémon, but Agatha knew that having Gengar give up half of its energy to likewise weaken Haunter would only be as effective as possible if she did it while Gengar was still relatively healthy and full of stamina. The strategy seemed to pay off, as once Curse ended and Gengar dropped to the ground on its knees in order to recover from the intense pain it was currently feeling, Haunter itself seemed to reel back in equal pain as it screeched and cried out in pain. As much as she hated to push her Pokémon in such a state, Agatha knew they needed to climax on the rare advantage they now had by ordering Gengar to get close and use a full-power Dark Pulse on the weakened Haunter. Even though it was now clearly drained and tired from using Curse, Gengar nodded and then jumped towards Haunter until it was just a short distance away. Its body glowing darkly, Gengar grunted in effort before throwing its hands out as a powerful burst of black energy exploded forth from its body and raced across the ground towards Haunter, ripping up and cratering the already destroyed chamber floor underneath it all the way. Ash and the others watched with bated breath as the dark pulse of energy collided with Haunter, whom was unprepared for it, and exploded on impact. Another loud shrieking sound emitted from Haunter as it was apparently very damaged by the attack. Agatha watched intently whilst Gengar stooped over and breathed heavily, the energy expenditure and exhaustion it was feeling from having been battling almost all night long finally catching up to its slightly aged self. As the smoke swirled around the chamber, everyone was almost certain that Haunter had been seriously damaged by such a powerful two-part combination attack, but, as visibility returned to normal again, they were all proven on just how wrong they were. Even though Haunter was soon revealed as having been definitely damaged and drained from enduring such powerful attacks from an Elite Four Pokémon, the Ghost type's rage and fury had clearly been underestimated. When the smoke cleared, Haunter's now burned and scuffed up form was slightly hunched over while its eyes were locked dead on Gengar. Its eyes were burning with a malicious rage which only became stronger the more its anger consumed it. Opening its mouth, Haunter let out a loud shriek which startled even Agatha and Gengar with the sheer ferocity and primal rage of it. Ash almost instantly had a bad feeling form in his stomach as he shouted to Agatha, "Agatha, get Gengar out of there. It's too tired to fight and I think Haunter is about to go off again." Being the seasoned professional she was though, Agatha was far ahead of Ash as she raised Gengar's Pokeball and prepared to return her Pokemon, not wanting Gengar to get injured in the exhausted state it was now in. "Gengar, return." However, that was all she managed to say before Haunter disappeared in the blink of an eye, completely astounding everyone with the totally unexpected and never-before-seen ability of seemingly instant invisibility it had just displayed. Having no time to react, Agatha was taken by surprise as well as Gengar, when Haunter reappeared out of the floor in front of the much smaller Pokémon. Before anyone could move or blink, a large glowing ball of dark energy formed in front of both of Haunter's outstretched hands before, with an enraged scream of rage, it pushed the shadow ball down onto Gengar's unprepared self. Even all of Agatha's many years of experience could not help her take action in time as her Pokémon was drilled down into the ground by Haunter's massive shadow ball, displaying power no one thought it would still possess in such vast quantities after being weakened by Gengar's curse. Agatha's Gengar cried in pain over the hum of the viciously churning ball of energy as it was pushed farther and farther down into the cold stone ground. Haunter only stopped the shadow ball just before its eyes charged up and then unleashed an equally as powerful Nightshade down onto its stunned and suffering final evolutionary form. Agatha, who was far from locking up in panic, tried to run as many different scenarios in as short a time as possible to help get Gengar out of the situation it was currently in, but Haunter had thoroughly taken them both by surprise in their moment of rest and now they were paying for it. The older woman was just about to call another of her Pokémon out to help Gengar before, in a flash, Ash ran past her and made a beeline towards Haunter. Eyes widening as his friends and Fuji yelled for him to stop, Agatha reached out and shouted, "Ash, no. Stop." It was too little too late though, because at that same moment, Pikachu came jumping past her and hurtled into the air, his tail turning to steel before he brought it down towards Haunter's head. The currently blinded by rage Pokémon was too preoccupied with torturing Gengar with Nightshade to sense the attack coming for it, and thus, was taken by total surprise when Pikachu's now iron-hard tail slammed down onto its massive head with a loud cry of, "Pika!" Haunter felt its whole body rattle with an enormous shaking sensation as it fell backwards, giving a shriek of pain, Nightshade finally being cut off and giving Gengar a much-needed reprieve as it just laid in the crater it was now in and trembled in pain. Pikachu flipped back and landed between Haunter and Gengar, using his own battle-ravaged body as a barrier between the two ghost types just as Ash jumped up on top of a nearly destroyed stone pillar and lunged at Haunter. A look of pure, unrestrained fire and desperation was alight in Ash's eyes as he sailed towards the Pokémon with his right hand outstretched, the palm of which was already starting to glow as the star mark appeared. "Haunter! Enough!" Ash shouted as the ancient ghost type looked up at him through eyes that were still blurry from the surprise Iron Tail Pikachu had used on it. The ghostly Pokémon's eyes widened in shock when it finally regained its wits just before Ash fully impacted with its body. The entire chamber was then bathed in a bright white light just before Ash and Haunter entered into the Star Marks dimension for the third time that night. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. When Ash opened his eyes and found himself once again floating in the suspended state of the Star Marks Odd Pocket dimension, the first thing he noticed about both he and Haunter was just how much of a serious toll the entire night had taken on them both. He himself felt like he had went 10 rounds with a whole group of champion fighting types, which is something he should know about since he did have experience with such things, and his entire body felt completely and utterly exhausted. Of course, he had been involved in 2 extremely stressful days, so it wasn't really a surprise to him, but still, even while not in his actual body, he could feel the exhaustion his mind was projecting over his astral self, and it was definitely taking a tiring toll. Looking across from him at the much larger and very imposing form of Haunter, Ash could also see with much clarity that the ghost type was feeling just as tired as he was. The way Haunter was slightly bent forward as its body expanded outward and inward with the obvious signs of heavy respiration as well as the look of fatigue in eyes, showed Ash that the Pokémon was feeling the effects of the harsh night almost the exact same as him. Briefly, Ash wondered if maybe entering the Star Mark state pulled on both the wielder and Pokémon's energy stores, and if that were the case, it would make sense why he and Haunter were appearing so tired. They had already entered the pocket dimension 3 times in one night, and for some reason, Ash just had a feeling that doing so was not only unsafe but also abnormal. Well, more abnormal than being in a strange dimension caused by an already abnormal hand mark could be at any rate. Turning his tired mind towards the present though, Ash tried to move himself forward as he spoke to Haunter through their current mental link in an equally as exhausted-sounding voice. "Haunter, please just calm down and let yourself feel peace. Please, don't you feel what this is doing to us? Is it worth it? Is going through all this exhaustion, pain and torment worth holding onto the anger and hatred in your heart? Is it?" he finished with a shout. Haunter obviously couldn't reply to Ash, but the way the bright red energy surrounding it pulsed angrily, which had replaced the former dark black aura and shadows that had been shrouding it before, he could tell Haunter was trying to retort back to him in a violent way. Something Ash didn't mind, since it at least seemed as though Haunter no longer had the energy to forcefully expel the connection like before. Managing to make himself float forward a little bit for the first ever time since he had first entered into the strange star state with Pikachu some time ago, Ash reached for Haunter as he spoke again. "Why? What do you have to gain by holding onto these grudges and keeping so much hate inside, Haunter? Tell me, what? The people that really deserved your wrath you killed long ago, so what is left for you to be this way? Why do you want to hurt people and cause so much pain? Do you think your old human friend would have wanted this for you? She would be ashamed of you and you know it. Ash saw the red aura around Hunter pulse again and swirl madly around, but he ignored it, opting to move forward just a little more. Something he found to be very difficult, since moving in what he was now calling the star state felt like moving legs made of iron through an ocean of sand up to your kneecaps. Is that how you live every day, Hunter? By lying to yourself and living in denial about you or in what you've done? Do you really tell yourself that the kind old woman who cared for you would have ever wanted you to live this way? If that's how you truly believe, then you are lost in more ways than you think. Ash gestured at the mighty ghost type with his hands. Look at yourself, Hunter. Look at what you've already done. You've freed yourself from the darkness and shadows that plagued and haunted you for numerous years. I may have helped you realize what you had become, but you were the one that wanted it bad enough to change yourself. Is that it? Are you now going to resign your existence to being angry and bitter when you are so close to having peace and freeing yourself completely from the hatred that controls you? Ash could see the glowing in Hunter's red eyes slowly start to fade as the violent red aura around the Pokémon very slightly began to flicker and pulse faintly, indecision and doubt beginning to reveal itself within the powerful creature's almost unreadable body language. Ash could see his words were starting to have an effect, so he pushed some of his own positive and pure energy towards Hunter in an effort to help soothe and reach the Pokémon sooner. Feeling even more fatigue overcome him as he pushed so much emotional energy at the ghost type, Ash had to focus and steel himself to keep from falling unconscious and breaking the connection. Hunter, can't you see the life you are missing out on? There is so much more to this life, so much more beauty and great things to see and do than you have ever known. People and Pokémon truly can live in peace and harmony together if they just try, and you know what, they do it all the time. I know you're angry and feel unbearable sadness for what happened to you and the human you cared for, but dwelling on it and handling everything with hatred and misery will never help you overcome the past. Dealing hatred with more hatred will never solve anything, Hunter, and all you'll accomplish by doing so is spreading more pain and hurt to a world that doesn't need any more. Pushing even more of his energy at Hunter as he focused as much compassionate warmth and caring feelings as he could into them, Ash continued to speak mentally while simultaneously fighting off the desire to collapse. You have to believe it, Hunter. You have to give this world another chance and stop living in the shadows of anger and grief. You are a great Pokémon with so much potential and promise, but you have to want it. You have to want to change yourself and be better. Not for me, not for the old woman, and not for anyone else, for you. The boy shook his head as white spots attempted to fill his vision. He could just barely see through his slightly fading sight, Hunter, as it looked at Ash intently. Its eyes were now a normal, non-glowing red, and the crimson aura around it had also ceased the fluctuating, twisting and flaring motions around Hunter that it had been. Instead, the aura was now unmoving, stagnant, strangely calm, as though the proverbial raging sea was just beginning to settle, leaving only the murky, muddy waters left to churn and froth in still unpredictable patterns. Ash could swear that he could also see a faint yellow aura trying to force its way through that of the much greater red one around Hunter, but at the moment, he just couldn't be sure. Instead, he spoke again in words that took much more effort to get out than before. You can fight it, Hunter. You can fight it. Hunter, for its part, was still having an internal struggle with itself. Though the words Ash spoke to it made much sense and kept trying to smash through the unbreakable barrier it had built around its heart and inner emotions, the memories and pain it still felt at losing its one human friend, the way it had rang like a bell in its head and caused a massive internal struggle which raged on even now. Eventually, the harsh debate within Hunter was enough to cause one final jolt of intense negative energy which, in his current state, Ash was unable to stand against, and caused the connection to break once more, sending the both of them back to the battle-destroyed sealing chamber below Pokémon Tower. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Ash was once again flung through the air as the connection between he and Hunter finally broke. Propelled at the same fast speeds as he had been the other two times, Ash was this time caught in a tight hold by Brock and Fuji, who had been waiting to catch Ash when he reappeared from the bright light dome that had been covering he and Hunter from sight while they were connected. Obviously surprised at being caught by two sets of hands instead of hitting something hard again like before, Ash looked up with his eyes all but bloodshot into the concerned faces of Brock and Fuji. How? He was forced to wet his dry mouth a little before continuing, how did you catch me? Fuji nodded towards Giselle, she and Misty quickly running over to join them. You can thank your lady friend for that, young man. She knew from watching the violent way you were shot out of that bright light every time your connection with Hunter was severed that it would probably happen again. She had myself and Brock get into the position she figured you would probably appear from so we could keep you from enduring another hard hit. Ash looked at Giselle as she knelt down and touched his cheek, her heart breaking at the sight of his exhausted, beaten-looking self. Ash, you look exhausted. Misty crouched beside of him as well. You need to rest, your body can't take much more, Ash, and you were already tired from last night when Fuji saved you. Brock patted his shoulder. You've had practically no time to recover, man, you're gonna hurt yourself if you're not careful. Ash still attempted to sit all the way up as he shook his head to clear it of the fluffy, flighty feeling he was experiencing currently. Pikachu, my Pokémon, ah. He quickly grabbed at his side where a large bruise had unknowingly formed when he was thrown into one of the stone pillars earlier in the night. Agatha. Gengar. Giselle broke off his strangled speech with a light push to his chest in order to get him to lay back against the stone slab behind him. They're okay, Ash, all of them. Your Pokémon are right here, by your side, you just can't see them because of how tired and heavy your eyes are right now. Pikachu, Charmander and Ghastly, they're okay. Ash then felt two small hands on his thighs, hearing Pikachu and Charmander both speak to him worriedly a few seconds later. Pikachu, Pikachu, the electric type called softly to his trainer while gently nudging Ash's leg with his nose. Charmander, Charmander also spoke in an equally as soft and concerned voice as he looked at his trainer's unhealthily exhausted features. Ash then felt a cold yet oddly comforting presence at his shoulder before Ghastly's unique, almost operatic voice spoke to him. You must rest, Ash, we are fine. I can sense your energy levels and they are dangerously low currently. At ease knowing that his Pokémon, though also tired and equally roughed up as he was, were okay, he grunted in pain before asking, what about Agatha? Fuji was the one to reply in order to calm his mind, she's fine, Ash, she and Gengar. Remember, they're both members of the most elite team of Pokémon and trainer in the entire region, they know how to take care of themselves. Gengar is tired and a little banged up, but both it and Agatha are ready to go again at a moment's notice. Fuji looked ahead and frowned. That light bubble that surrounded you and Hunter still isn't gone yet, and we can't see Hunter because of it. She and Gengar are standing by prepared in case it comes out attacking again. Ash's eyes finally opened fully as he forced himself to take in his surroundings clearly. Once the swimming and blurriness finally began to pass from his eyes, he was able to see everything around him with no more blurriness. His eyes first landed upon Giselle and Misty, who were kneeling in front of him with looks of concern on their faces, and then to his Pokémon. He could see Pikachu and Charmander on either side of his legs, also looking at him with concern. The two of them were rather beat up and worn down looking, just as all of them were, but they were still okay. He couldn't see them, but he knew Ghastly, Fuji and Brock were just behind him. Looking forward past the girls, Ash saw Agatha standing with her Gengar a few feet away, both of them with their backs turned to him. He could see some rips and dirt on Agatha's purple dress, but, looking at himself and also Misty and Giselle, could tell they looked pretty much the same. Gengar appeared a little worse for the wear, but, true to its fearsome reputation and very experienced ways, looked as though it could fight again at a moment's notice, regardless of the harsh beating it had suffered at Hunter's hands or its older age. Looking past those two, Ash finally spotted what Fuji had been talking about and saw that he was indeed correct. A large dome of pure white light was expanded across half of the chamber, and seeing it made Ash's eyes widen. Is that what it looks like when I connect with Hunter? Fuji nodded. Yes. Both times you came in contact with Hunter, you were immediately veiled in that same dome of light. The only difference is that every time before now, it would disappear the moment you came hurtling out of it. Now it's staying up and we have no idea why. Ash looked from Fuji, back to the dome of light, and then scrunched his face up in thought. But, why would, his words were suddenly cut off as, the very next instant, the light dome started to flicker and shudder before it commenced to glowing even brighter. The light became so bright that they all had to cover their eyes, and then, just as the light reached its apex, it simply vanished without a single trace or warning. Opening his eyes and uncovering them afterwards, Ash looked ahead again where the light dome once was and now saw, finally, Hunter floating in the air in the almost exact center of the chamber. The Pokémon looked to be a little scuffed up with singe marks here and there on its body, but all in all, it appeared to be the least damaged out of any of them. Haunter was clearly very tired, however, as a few beads of sweat could be seen trickling down its body. Knowing that ghost types couldn't perspire, however, Ash figured that what looked like water in the form of sweat was actually just a physical representation of Haunter's massive energy expenditure that it had been suffering with throughout the entire night. Most likely the water was just crystallized forms of the ghostly energy that Haunter needed to simply keep itself levitating in a state of such exhaustion, let alone battle. Which was all something Professor Oak had explained to Ash about himself, since many people would become confused when they saw a ghost type perspire. Haunter not only appeared to be sweating in exhaustion, but the look on its face showed the fatigue the Pokémon was feeling. The way its eyes were slightly narrowed and the look of effort Haunter seemed to be executing just to keep its massive form up proved that the night had definitely taken its toll on it, as well as the star-marked connections Ash had forced upon it. Ash and Haunter's eyes locked onto each other, and in that moment, Ash could see the conflict and turmoil still battling it out within the Pokémon's eyes. It wasn't as bad as before, but he could still see it there, and he knew his goal hadn't yet been achieved. Ash knew furthermore that what he was about to do would probably result in him putting his life in imminent danger, or at the very least his physical well-being, but he wasn't going to back down. Not now, when he had come so far to help Haunter. It was his idea to do all of this, and he knew he had to see it through to the end no matter what. Giselle and the others had their eyes on Haunter as they watched anxiously for what the Pokémon was going to potentially do. Agatha readied herself and her Gengar did the same, fully expecting the need to go into action once more if the volatile Pokémon before them went into another rage. Which, even though they were not looking forward to fighting such a powerhouse again, Agatha and Gengar knew they had a duty to protect everyone in not just that room but also all of the town in case Haunter tried to escape now that the sealing chamber was in ruins. What no one, not even Haunter itself, was expecting, however, was for Ash to struggle to his feet on very wobbly legs. His friends saw this and right away tried to stop him. "No, Ash, what are you doing?" Brock shouted as he tried to get Ash to sit back down. "You can't keep going like this," Giselle scolded in an admonishing tone of voice as she and Misty reached for his arms. Ash just shook them all off, however, and shouted back, "No, I have to do this." Everyone stopped after his outburst and just stared at him, causing Ash to sigh before continuing in a quieter, though no less intense tone, "Please listen to me, you guys. I have to finish this. I started this, I was the one that made the decision to help Haunter, and I was the one that gave it hope." He gestured towards Haunter with a tilt of his head. "I know you all don't see it and still think Haunter is just waiting to destroy us all and be free, but I'm telling you, there is good in it, and now, for the first time ever, also a sense of hope. I was the one connected to Haunter's heart and I could feel it. I could actually feel the hope and desire to change forming deep down inside of it. All Haunter wants truthfully is to have peace in its life and for someone to care for it. I know it's true because I could see it in Haunter's eyes and feel it coming out through its emotions." He shook his head slightly and finally stood up completely while fully adjusting to his surroundings. Looking back up then, he focused his eyes on Haunter and spoke in a voice thick with emotion, "All Haunter wants is love, to feel wanted and no longer be alone. It just wants someone to be there for it and help to take away the pain in its life, but it's too scared to know how right now. I have to help it. I have to show Haunter how beautiful life can be." Surprising all of them then, Ash suddenly broke off into a run and started a mad, all-out dash for Haunter while crying out, "Our destinies are now intertwined through the connections we've made and I won't give up on it. Ash, come back." Giselle and Misty both screamed at the same time, horrified for his safety. Even though they understood what Ash's motivation was to risk so much for Haunter, it did little to ease or take away the fear they felt at having something horrible happen to him. Brock and Fuji watched on in disbelief just before Pikachu, Charmander and Ghastly, inspired by their trainer's heart and determination, took off running after as quickly as their banged-up bodies would allow them to. Agatha turned her head and stared in fascination as Ash blazed past her, not even bothering to try and stop him, so taken aback was she by the boy's sheer spirit and determination to do what he felt was right. Even Gengar itself seemed more than a little surprised as well at Ash's vigor and heart. The boy could see Hunter looking at him as he ran, and Ash was also able to see a mixture of surprise, unease and even a bit of fear in its eyes as he rapidly attempted to close the distance between them. What he wasn't expecting though, which he probably should have, was the way Hunter would handle such confusion and fear. Which was with aggression. Before he could process what was happening, Hunter opened its huge maw and formed a large shadow ball in it that it quickly fired at Ash. The boy saw the blazing ball of dark energy coming at him, and just as he went to stop, a jet of powerful orange flames came rushing over his head before colliding with the ball of energy and exploding in a mixture of shadowy darkness and cherry red heat. Ash looked back and saw his 3 Pokémon following closely behind him, with Charmander closing his mouth after having just expelled the flamethrower that stopped the shadow ball. Smiling at them, Ash ran faster towards Hunter, while at the same time, the powerful ghost type grew more and more nervous and held its hands up before launching multiple shadow balls at them. Pikachu used agility and quickly jumped up into the air, landing in front of Ash as the small electric type started running in zigzag patterns towards Hunter. Seeing the many balls of energy coming towards him, Pikachu's whole body glowed faintly yellow before he started shooting several bolts of electricity that impacted with the individual balls of darkness and destroyed them in a bright explosion of arcing voltage and wispy shadows. Ash drew even closer to Hunter, and the Pokémon visibly began to lose its composure as its eyes glowed red and fired off a massive twin beam of nightshade at the young trainer. However, Ghastly was fast and came to a stop high up in the air before his eyes glowed blue. In a poof of smoke, a solid wall of steel erected itself up between Ash and Hunter's attack, Nightshade slamming into the defensive barrier and drilling into it mercilessly in an attempt to smash through and reach its intended target. Ghastly grunted as his weakened self tried to maintain the illusion. "Move faster, Ash, and get out of the way. Illusions are never as powerful as a real attack, and I'm not going to be able to hold this much longer." Ash quickly nodded and pushed his tired body to run faster. He just managed to get past the steel wall and ghostly beam of energy drilling against it when Ghastly finally lost the strength to keep it up. The wall disappeared in a burst of smoke, and the powerful ghost-type move sped forward to hit the only thing it still could, which was Ghastly. Ash heard his Pokémon cry out in pain and stopped just long enough to turn around and see Ghastly getting forced back across the chamber before impacting with a pile of debris on the floor and going still, Giselle quickly running to his side. Ash turned around again in time to catch sight of Hunter's eyes glowing red again. Although, unlike every other time so far, Nightshade wasn't what came from its eyes. Instead, reddish-colored rings of what Ash recognized to be hypnosis energy came floating towards him at an alarmingly fast pace. Like every attack Hunter had at its disposal, they were all massively oversized, and this also rung true for hypnosis, whose rings were twice if not 3 times the size of normal ones. Ash's eyes widened since he knew he couldn't dodge such a widespread attack, but instead of being hit with the sleep-inducing rings and falling into blissful unconsciousness like he thought would happen, Ash was instead knocked out of the way and landed a few feet away to the side after he felt something small and compact slam into his side. Looking up from the ground, Ash saw that it was Pikachu who had pushed him out of the way just before the rings of hypnosis could reach him. The attack was not only much bigger than normal but also much more effective, because the very next instant, Pikachu went from fully awake to sprawled totally on the ground and out cold like a light. Ash's worry for his Pokémon only doubled when Hunter's whole body glowed red, and then a spectral, energy-made construct of the Pokémon appeared from within it and went flying at Pikachu immediately afterwards. Ash knew exactly what attack Hunter was using and desperately tried to scramble to his feet and run for Pikachu. He was far too slow though for that. In that next second, Hunter's deadly doppelganger reached Pikachu and then melded itself inside of the sleeping Pokémon. What was quickly revealed to be none other than the attack Dream Eater worked quickly on Pikachu after that. Surrounding the small Pokémon in a red haze of energy that turned into sparks of red electricity, the malevolent fake of Hunter quite literally sapped Pikachu's energy from him in vast quantities within mere moments. Finally on his feet, though unsteady, Ash felt immense worry, since not only would such an attack be very damaging to Pikachu, but also, if all of that energy managed to feed itself back into Hunter, then the ghost type would essentially have a large portion of its power restored to it. Taking immediate action, Ash ran for Pikachu and then dove himself into the red cloud of energy-draining fog that was around his Pokémon. Feeling the oppressive, heavy feeling of Dream Eater weighing down on him even though he wasn't asleep. Ash quickly developed a much greater respect for his Pokémon if that was what they felt every time they were hit with an opponent's attack. Scooping Pikachu up into his arms, Ash ran out of the red haze, enraging Haunter since it had not yet finished siphoning off the energy from the electric type that it was going to use to restore its strength. Opening its mouth again immediately afterwards, Haunter formed and then released yet another abnormally large shadow ball at Ash, its anger and rage giving fuel to its attack. Ash looked over his shoulder and saw the shadow ball closing upon him. Closing his eyes, he knelt down and turned away while cradling the still fast asleep Pikachu in his arms. The boy was bracing for impact, but instead of receiving it, he instead heard a loud call of, "Char!" before feeling a strong and very powerful heat at his back. Looking over his shoulder again, Ash saw Charmander standing baying him while bravely battling the immense shadow ball with an equally as impressive jet of extremely hot-looking flames which came roaring out from his wide-open mouth. Ash and everyone else in the chamber looked on in amazement and fascination as Charmander battled the ball of huge energy in an attempt to keep his trainer safe. Something that brought a smile of pride and adoration to Ash's face as he watched his Pokémon fight as hard as he could to keep he and Pikachu safe. Watching Charmander now, the way he stood illuminated by the flames of his own attack, arms stretched out to the sides with his eyes clenched tightly shut and sweat pouring down his body as he struggled to put every ounce of power he had into the flamethrower he had going, made Ash realize just how special Charmander truly was as well as how powerful he was deep down inside. Ash honestly couldn't help but wish Charmander's old trainer Damien could see his useless Pokémon now because, at the angle he was standing, Charmander looked everything like a total winner and one-of-a-kind Pokémon to him. The precious moment of fickle reflection was unfortunately ruined the next moment, however, when a combination of Haunter forcing more power into its attack and Charmander running out of the energy needed to keep its flamethrower going finally overwhelmed the small Pokémon's brave resistance. The giant shadow ball quickly pushed straight through the fire and slammed into the ground directly in front of the three of them, launching Ash and his two Pokémon across the room like simple pebbles. The entire chamber shaking once more from the force of the explosion in a very violent manner. Giselle, Misty and the others shouted in fear for Ash as they saw him and Charmander getting tossed up into the air and then watched helplessly as they both slammed down onto the ground seconds later. Giselle and Misty tried to run out to them but were stopped by Fuji and Brock. Giselle stopped. Brock struggled against her as she tried to get free from his grasp. "Haunter might attack you too. Just stay here for now." Hearing Brock and knowing he was right, Misty stopped fighting against Fuji, which prompted him to let her go. Instead, she just yelled across the room, "Ash, are you okay? Ash." Agatha herself appeared to be extremely frustrated and antsy because she desperately wanted to go and help Ash but was also afraid that if she made any sudden movements, especially with her Gengar, then Haunter might go off again and attack. Which would have been very bad since in their currently down state, Ash and his Pokémon could get easily caught in the crossfire and become seriously injured or even killed. When the smoke settled eventually some distance away, Ash was seen laying on his stomach with Pikachu curled protectively into him. Charmander was just a few feet away laying on his own stomach with cuts, fresh marks and bruises covering the now very dirty Pokémon's body. Ash slowly shifted around while groaning before opening his eyes and looking down. Seeing that Pikachu was still fast asleep, he then looked to where Charmander was laying on the ground a few feet away, appearing to be very beat up and more than just a little bit exhausted. Dropping his head back to the ground, Ash's eyes fluttered as he whispered quietly to himself, "I'm sorry Haunter, but I just can't do this. I'm too tired. I can't even move." A feeling of great despair and failure settled over him as Ash closed his eyes tightly. I failed." Tears began prickling at the corners of his eyes as the feelings of total defeat and regret washed over him. Quiet sobs started to slowly rack his body as he just laid there, feeling utterly helpless. That was until, however, he heard soft, unsteady footsteps coming towards him. Opening his teary eyes, Ash saw to his astonishment, Charmander moving towards him in slow, wobbly strides. One of his eyes were closed and a cut ran down his side, but Charmander's face never wavered as he stared dead at Ash with a look of unwavering strength and unshakable determination on his face. Ash continued to watch Charmander walk towards him without even blinking until the Pokémon was standing at the side of his face. Looking up, He was about to say something until Charmander cut him off with a shout and started waving his arms around furiously. Charmander! 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 Char! The fire type spoke fiercely as he stared down at his trainer. Charmander! Char! Ash just looked at his Pokémon as he went off on what he somehow knew was a heated, no-nonsense speech of some kind. He really didn't get what Charmander was saying until he saw his Pokémon point at Haunter and then back at him, almost as if he was trying to tell Ash to do something. After watching the same gestures a few times, Ash finally got what Charmander was saying and replied to him, You're trying to tell me not to give up and to keep going, aren't you, Charmander? You're telling me to not stop until I've done what I came to do, is that it? Charmander just nodded and held his fists up to his chest. Ash smiled sadly and replied, But I can't even move right now, Charmander. I'm too. That was all he managed to say as he suddenly felt a stinging sensation erupt on his face. His whole head turning, Ash's cheek burned like a hot iron had just struck it. Looking back at Charmander, he saw the fire type standing with his tail extended outward. Realizing that his own Pokémon had just slapped him, Ash was about to say something before Charmander went off on another slew of intensive, loud and unintelligible sounds. Charmander! 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 Ash just listened to his Pokémon go on, and even though he couldn't hear what Charmander was really saying, he understood the meaning behind it. He could tell that Charmander was basically telling him, How dare you even think about giving up, Ash? You've never taught us to give up before and now you're just gonna lay there and do nothing. I don't think so. You started this and now you have to end it. You wanted to help Haunter, so get up and do it. We're behind you all the way just like we always are, so don't you dare give in now. Stand up and fight. Being able to in some way know what Charmander was telling him without speaking human tongue gave rise to a fire being rekindled in Ash's gut again. The self-belief and inner strength that his Pokémon was trying to inspire within him made Ash feel both miserable and furious about himself for even thinking of giving up in that moment. It was just like Charmander was trying to tell him, Ash started this. He was the one who wanted to help Haunter and he had put a lot of people and Pokémon at risk by doing so. Because of that, he owed it to not just them or Haunter but also himself to see it through. His eyes hardening with resolve once more, Ash nodded to Charmander's words as he laid Pikachu down and slowly started to get to his feet. You're right, Charmander. I can't give up now. I won't give up now. We've come too far now to quit and I can't let that happen. Standing fully up, he turned around and looked at Haunter while clenching his fists. I made a promise and now I'm gonna keep it. Charmander just looked at his trainer proudly before nodding his own head and looking back at Haunter again, his tail flame blazing brightly as he prepared himself to give his all for his trainer and human friend. Leaving Pikachu where he was, Ash called out loudly with a cry of firm resolve, Charmander doing the same, before the two of them rushed forward again towards Haunter with everything they possibly had to give being all laid out on the table in that time. Every last shred of willpower and stamina they had being pushed into one final assault. Obviously taken by surprise at Ash's continued relentless persistence, Haunter watched in surprise as Ash and Charmander ran towards it with all haste. Feeling the pressure of being backed in a corner, the ghostly Pokémon started using practically every attack it had at its disposal to stop the impending charge of the two coming for it. Ash could see a virtual volley of shadow balls coming his way along with a thick beam of nightshade cutting through the middle of them all, but instead of slowing down, he merely put his trust and connected his heart, in a sense, to Charmander. His faith wasn't wasted either because at that same moment, Charmander ran in front of him and opened his mouth as a roaring jet of flames came spewing forth and swept across the chamber, coming into contact with and destroying every single shadow ball it came in contact with. As Haunter's nightshade drew closer to them, Charmander stopped and built up the energy in his body quickly before, with his body shaking in effort, he opened his mouth again and released a powerful purplish-blue blast of dragon rage which collided together with nightshade and began a battle of dominance which quickly ended in a dual explosion. Haunter was now clearly doing whatever it could in order to keep itself away from any further contact as rings of red, sleep-causing energy came forth from its eyes and headed towards Ash. The boy could see this coming however and quickly commanded Charmander to get in front of him and use smoke screen. His Pokémon did so with no hesitation and hastily expelled a cloud of inky black smoke from his mouth which quickly coalesced around the two of them and hid Ash and himself from view. The rings of hypnosis entered into the smoke cloud, but unfortunately for Haunter, their aim wasn't true as Ash and Charmander came running out of the smoke the next moment at a totally different direction than hypnosis had entered. Seeing that they were within just a few small yards of Haunter, Ash smirked to himself that they were going to make it. What he wasn't prepared for though was Haunter making a final move out of almost complete desperation. Before he or Charmander could fully react, Haunter's massive body started to glow bright red as a powerful-looking aura surrounded its form. Scrunching its body up in intense concentration and effort, Haunter's eyes pulsed with equally as bright red energy and its mouth opened as the ghost type began emitting a loud screeching sound. Ash promptly stopped and put his hand out to stop Charmander as well while looking at Haunter in confusion. The ghost Pokémon continued to struggle and focus its power as the shroud of red energy around it commenced to growing and expanding. It was only then that Ash finally understood what Haunter was doing and his eyes widened at the realization. Turning around, he looked down at Charmander and started madly gesturing to the way they just came from. "Run, Charmander. It's about to use curse." He turned out to be right on the money too, because at that very next moment, just when Ash and Charmander started running away in the opposite direction as fast as they could, Haunter finally let loose with curse and did so in a way that was very unusual. Meaning that instead of needing to have a target to latch onto and steal energy away from, the massively enhanced and mega-powered curse acted like a bomb. The red energy around Haunter formed into a rotating sphere just below it and then impacted into the ground below like a humongous hammer clobbering the earth. As the energy Haunter had been building up for who knows how long finally exploded, Ash and Charmander jumped for it and hit the ground for cover while the others all took shelter behind a few scattered piles of rubble and whatever else they could find. The attack that had been made much more powerful than usual thanks to Haunter's far larger than normal size, like Dragonite and Tentacruel, completely annihilated everything around its blast radius and turned it all to ashes. Quite literally, everything even close to Haunter was now nothing more than fine powder and smoke. Crushed into nothing by the might of ghostly energy which had been somehow effectively turned into raw destructive power by Haunter when it unleashed curse. As the smoke and shaking finally stopped and cleared off respectively, Ash looked up from his arms while still laying flat on his stomach and tried to see ahead. Charmander as well uncovered his own head from beside of Ash and used his keener eyes to peer further than that of what his trainer could. Both of them were able to finally see Haunter at just about the same time as everyone far behind them was, and when they gazed upon the titanically large ghost type, a collective gasp escaped from everyone at practically the same time. What shocked the humans and even their Pokémon so much was the sight of Haunter. Instead of looking like the scary, dangerous and monstrous Pokémon they had all become accustomed to seeing, now they were looking at something which just appeared grotesque, for lack of a better word. Haunter's entire body was ballooned out to epic proportions until it resembled a massively overinflated beach ball, and it only just kept getting bigger and bigger. Its eyes were also all but bulged out of their sockets and its mouth was open unnaturally wide like it was trying to filter feed. Ash stood up and looked at Haunter with a mixture of befuddlement and slight disgust as he said aloud, "What the hell is Haunter doing?" Giselle, Misty, Brock and even Fuji seemed at a loss, but Agatha, who had been watching everything happen from the sidelines in case she and Gengar needed to intervene at some point, widened her eyes as her several years of battling experience told her exactly what it was Haunter was doing, and not only did it astound her but it also scared her. Cupping her hands over her mouth, she shouted, "Ash!" And when the boy turned to look at her, Agatha continued almost frantically, "Ash, get back here. We have to leave now. All of us." His face must have shown his question, but Agatha yelled again, "I don't know how, but Haunter is about to use self-destruct and that's why it's expanding. It's gathering all of its energy into one focal point and then it's going to explode and destroy itself, probably taking the entire tower with it." Ash's friends and Fuji all looked at Agatha with varying degrees of shock as the older man gave voice to it all. "What? How is that possible? Self-destruct doesn't kill a Pokémon, it just renders them into a temporarily unconscious state from the massive energy depletion the power for the attack calls for." Agatha quickly returned her Gengar as she shook her head. "Not this time. I can tell by the way Haunter's body is expanding that it is drawing on every available ounce of energy that it has in order to destroy itself. For what reason I do not know, but I do know that it's about to commit suicide, and if we don't leave now then we're all dead. Ash was about to respond until they suddenly heard struggling from outside of the chamber. Turning to look, he and everyone else was surprised to see the 3 wild ghost Pokémon that had served as Hunter's servants getting pulled in from the ante-chamber quickly, struggling all the way as they were sucked in like a vacuum towards Hunter's gaping mouth. In sick fascination, Ash and the others watched as Ghastly, Hunter and Gengar were swallowed up into the bigger Hunter's maw and disappeared into nothing, subsequently causing Hunter's body to expand that much more. Giselle gasped. Were they a part of Hunter? Fuji nodded slowly. I think so. They must have been constructs of energy that Hunter somehow was able to create in order to guard it in the tower while it was trapped in here, even while it was sealed. Brock shook his head, squinty eyes never leaving Hunter's growing body. Amazing, that's incredible. Agatha quickly hurried out to grab the still sleeping Pikachu into her arms and then ran back towards the others much faster than a person her age should have been able to, like Fuji, as she started to rush them all. Yes, it's fascinating now everyone, return your Pokémon now, we have to go. Her words seemed to snap the others out of their individual stupors as they began hurriedly returning their Pokémon. The Elite Four member then started ushering them all quickly towards the exit until just she, Giselle and Fuji were in the rear. Turning around at what remained of the door, which was now just a huge gaping hole, once everyone was through, Giselle shouted back at Ash, "Come on, we have to go, Ash. Hurry." He didn't even register her words though. Ash just remained rooted to the floor as he stared up at Hunter with his eyes locked onto the soon-to-explode Pokémon. He heard Giselle scream at him again, but he still didn't reply or even turn around. Ah! Giselle groaned in frustration. What's wrong with him? Ghastly, who had managed to recover a little by this point and was up and floating again, looked out at his trainer with a calculating and thoughtful expression on his face. Realizing rather quickly what Ash was thinking, Ghastly started to curse, damn that boy and his recklessness. He quickly looked at Brock and Fuji, one of you go get him now. Agatha caught onto what the talking ghost type was alluding to immediately, being the intelligent and wizened person she was. Fuji seemed to understand as well, but Agatha voiced it before he could, calling to Ash with authority in her voice, "You get back here right now, young man, don't you even think about it." "Ash, it's not worth it," Fuji yelled desperately. It was only then that Ash turned around and said, much to his friend's confusion, Ghastly's frustration and the older adult's horror, "It is to me." Looking down at Charmander, he said quickly to his confused Pokémon, "Charmander, go with them right now." With no further words, he took off running at Hunter as Agatha and his friends screamed after him, Fuji and Ghastly watching